Hello, lovely listeners. I am here with the amazing Kira Sutherland, who is a sports nutritionist, naturopath, and medical astrologer. She is a good friend and a fabulous teacher. And I see this question over and over again with my clients, which is perimenopause and menopause. And it's a problem. And you have been my amazing teacher around all of this. And I've learned so much. And I feel like there's so many misnomers and misconceptions there around what menopause and perimenopause looks like. So I wanted to get Kira on and just have a chat about what it is. So I guess, Kira, let's start with what is perimenopause and what's the difference between perimenopause and menopause?
Sure. So probably easier to start with menopause. Menopause is you're legally considered menopausal when you haven't had a period for an entire year. So if you go 10 months with no bleeding and then you have a bleed, you got to go another year. So that's kind of the doorway of menopause. And, a lot of women are going to have a few years where there's very few periods before you legally can say you're in menopause. Whereas perimenopause, which is really what everybody is always talking about, but we somehow accidentally have labeled it, oh, she's in the menopause. It's like, no, she's in the perimenopause. And perimenopause is unfortunately anywhere from like 2 to 10 years of before you stop having your period, of dropping hormone levels, fluctuating hormone levels. It's not just a free dive of hormones. There's an up and down of the hormones. And so it's when we start having hormones dropping or fluctuating, and it's also when we start having the myriad of symptoms well beyond just hot flushes and being a bit cranky. There is, oh my God, there's just this plethora of symptoms going on, and a lot of them you don't even realize until you experience them, and then you go, oh my God, is that part of perimenopause as well? And it's a bit crazy how much actually happens to the body.
Yeah, because I've had clients and friends go to me, there's no way I'm in perimenopause because my flow's actually getting heavier.
Yeah.
And then I say to them, that's actually a symptom of it.
Yes.
So what are some of the symptoms?
Yeah. And so, as we hit our 40s, and people freak out, right? Because a lot of women are having babies in their late 30s or early 40s, and that's totally doable. But we also start losing a lot of hormones around the 40s. And yes, you can still be fertile, but yes, you can start having hormone changes in the 40s. Some people will even suggest it's the end of the 30s. Not saying that's when you hit perimenopause, but just, every decade of your life is like a different scenario with your hormones. So once, early 40s, definitely by mid 40s, most women I'm seeing have some symptoms, and some women might be like, no, I didn't get anything until 50. But if they backtrack and you actually list the symptoms, they go, oh yeah, maybe I did have some of those. So if you're 45 and starting to get symptoms, you're right in the medium range. That's normal. So don't freak out. So common symptoms. Oh my gosh, where to start? And add in anything I forget because I don't have a list. The ever familiar hot flushes, whether they're happening at night or during the day, it doesn't matter. Everybody's different. Hot flushes. One of the biggest problems I see is, people can have a loss of libido or change in libido. There can be more vaginal dryness around that whole tissue and area. So you can also have changes with lubrication and desire for sex because it can be more painful or not. So, that's where there's lots of things to help with that. Your period can get lighter and lighter, or it can get heavier and heavier. So both of those are on the spectrum, depending on how you're clearing your estrogen, depending on a lot of other things. You can go one way or another. Even if you've never had heavy periods before, they can start, 40s is when women start going, oh my God, I'm like flooding. This is crazy. So you can have the period go in either way. Often your period gets shorter.
Yeah,
so
the cycle itself.
I shouldn't laugh. At 52, I've been through most of this. You can have heavier periods more frequently. Like it's your world's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
PMS can still be there, pain can still be there, other bad symptoms. I think one of the hardest symptoms is trouble falling asleep and staying asleep.
Yeah.
As we lose our progesterone. Now, progesterone is a hormone that we create after we ovulate. And as it is the first thing to start dipping in our 40s. And progesterone is like a stress hormone. It helps us relax. It helps us be more calm. And as we start to lose progesterone, we often have trouble either falling asleep or actually staying in deep sleep. So whether it's a hot flush waking us up or not, you end up as a lighter sleeper or trouble getting to sleep. And it becomes crippling for some people. I would say 40-50% of the women I treat, I really see sleep. And then what happens is if sleep goes off, everything else ricochets because you're tired, you're grumpier, your body isn't working as well. Weight gain can happen as we lose hormones and hit perimenopause, but not sleeping impacts the weight gain even worse, even more. So I find the sleep is actually one of the kingpins of the issue.
Yeah.
And dealing with that. What other symptoms? I was thinking of
the soreness of the breasts. Like that's something that I've spoken to people about. I know myself, it's almost like when I was pregnant. They swell up so much. There's this just exacerbation. So
yeah. And then you get worried that you're pregnant at 45 as well and start freaking. I remember getting some pregnancy tests going, no, there's no way. Yes, that can happen.
Yeah.
There's something else. The other one that everybody doesn't always relate to perimenopause is palpitations, panic attacks, and anxiety.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I mean, all these women that all of a sudden, you can hear about this often when people go, oh, I just don't like driving at night anymore. I'm like, what do you mean you don't like driving at night? And they're like, I get too anxious. We're not that old at 45. Panic attacks and anxiety, and they start not wanting to do things socially. And a lot of that is actually coming from that hormone architecture of it decreasing. And so we go into these, all these women end up on antidepressants because they have this crippling anxiety. Whereas if we actually worked on I'm not saying people don't, but if you work on the hormones and support the body, often a lot of that becomes more controllable.
Yeah. I know, look, I've got a client who was actually hospitalized back in the 80s with perimenopause at that stage because of her anxiety. They actually thought she was in psychosis, but it wasn't. It was as soon as she was treated with hormone replacement therapy, she was fine and she was out of there. But it can be that anxiety that comes up. It's just so unexpected. It's like PMT, but much more.
And I had never really experienced anxiety before. It's just, I'm one of those kind of go at it people, I get nervous about stuff and wound up. And I remember being on an airplane, an international flight by myself, quite comfy and like premium economy, watching my movie. I unfortunately chose to watch a slightly scary movie. And I remember having this out of body panicky experience where I was like, I feel like I'm having a panic attack. I think this is what this is. And I couldn't place why on a plane I was having, like, nothing was wrong. I was quite happy. It wasn't a scary flight. There was no turbulence. And I remember looking back going, okay, I was 46 and obviously there was some weird stuff going on. And the beginning of that intensity feeling.
Yeah. So you're not going crazy. This is perimenopause. It's part of what it is. The other one I wanted to ask you about is the fatigue.
Oh, yes.
And you've described it brilliantly in the past as you just need to know these years are years to rest. But I know for especially this age and stage that many of us are going through, we've got young kids,
little kids,
aging parents, we're working, and yet there's this massive amount of fatigue.
Oh, yeah. And, I don't know what comes first, the sleep issue or the fatigue, but the fatigue is astronomical. And you can't push through it, fatigue. Or if you do, you're just digging yourself a bigger hole. We used to talk about adrenal exhaustion, but we're not allowed to say that anymore. We're now supposed to say hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction. Basically HPA dysfunction.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah, it's, we're trying to live these superhuman, superwoman lives. And it's like, I gotta hang that cape up every now and then. We can't, there's so much we're trying to do and you can't push through it. And if you do, you dig yourself a bigger hole.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of my big things for people is, as you know, sleep as much as possible, nap if that's not going to mess up your nighttime, but support those adrenals. Pushing on more coffee is not going to fix it. Drinking more alcohol at night is not going to fix it. And that's
having sugar is not going to fix it.
Yeah, it's all gonna, yeah. And you need more rest than you realize, but you have to realize it will go away. Like the fatigue does get better if we stop. And if we don't, what's happening too, which a lot of people don't understand, is as you lose progesterone, your hormones have this whole conversation with your gut and your microbiome. And that kind of has to rejig itself. And that's connected to your nervous system, but also it's connected to your immune system. So as we lose hormones, we have this whole kind of reconfiguration that has to go on with our microbiome and with our immune system. And if we push, our immune system takes a jump off of a cliff somewhere. And this is where a lot of women run into like a chronic fatigue situation, or, I've seen a lot of women run into chronic viral issues. So like and this happened to me. I'm not I'm not immune to this. I got shingles at the age of 49. I wasn't even stressed when it happened, and all of a sudden I had shingles. And you go to the doctor and they're like, that's an old person's ailment, you're way too young for shingles. And I was like, oh, okay then, but I still got shingles. And shingles is it's the chickenpox virus coming back. And then you talk to all your other girlfriends that are your age or slight, it's good to collect girlfriends 5 years older than you.
Yeah.
And every one of my 50 to 55-year-old girlfriends is like, oh yes, that's really common at menopause and perimenopause. And I'm like, I've been a practitioner for 20 years. How do I not know that?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, it is so common. And again, it's your immune system recalibrating itself. And tell you what, if you ever want fatigue, you do perimenopause and shingles at the same time.
Well, I know for me, I used to work in early childhood, so my immune system was basically bulletproof, but not once I hit perimenopause. I pick up everything the kids bring home from school now. And it's, I guess, similar to pregnancy. It's just that time where the body's busy doing other things and just doesn't put the energy into immunity. So we've talked about all these symptoms. What can we do? What are some of the best things to do? And look, you've already mentioned rest, and I'm guessing, I know some of the main ones: avoid too much caffeine, too much alcohol, too much sugar, because all of these affect the health of the follicle and therefore the progesterone that comes into our system.
Yeah. So diet, often we put on weight around perimenopause as well. You go into what will be classified as a bit of an insulin resistant state. So it's much easier to put on weight and it's much harder to take it off. So you really need to look at keeping cortisol levels and stress levels low, which is super hard if you're not sleeping. So it's this whole cycle. So absolutely focus on sleep.
How many hours a night,
8.
Kira?
Let's be honest, it's 8.
Great.
At least try to stay in bed for that 8, even if you're not asleep that whole time. 7.5, 8.5. Sleep, eating really, eating really well, like staying away from the sugars. You will find many women have to drop not all of their carbohydrates, but you have to be more careful with the carbohydrates and the breads and the grains that you're choosing. And you need to swap in a lot more leafy greens, bright colored vegetables, your berries, rather than quite as much bread and rice as maybe your body, we psychologically want. But yeah, I'm going to say that you can't have it, but you just got to pick it. Some people find they have to do slightly smaller portions, and you can't. A really big thing is, as you gain the weight and you're having this cortisol problem and hormone issues, some women will go and start to flog themselves exercise. It's worked in the past. I'll just run more. I'll go do another HIIT class. But it's not always the way at perimenopause. You figure it out what works for yourself. But I find a lot of women end up doing better off not doing the high intensity. They need to do their strength training for their bone density, but yoga, Pilates, you know, exercise bands, weights, not as much hit. And a lot more, you know, walking, bushwalking, get out in nature, join your, you know, there's a reason you see clumps of women all out walking together, because it's so good. You know, slow running. I'm not saying not to exercise, but sometimes you got to change it up. And if you've been really fit, it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to like surrender that a little bit.
Yeah.
Watch the sugar, watch the caffeine. Some people have to totally give up caffeine at that point. It'll make the anxiety worse, palpitations, panic attacks. So watch the caffeine. But the alcohol, you know, I find women in their mid 40s either take this deep dive into 2 to 3 glasses a day, or they go the complete opposite and they become so sensitive they can't handle the alcohol. So just be really cautious with alcohol. We do a lot of alcohol for stress management in our society.
Yes. Yeah.
And, you know, the truth is more than 7 alcohol units a week increases your chance of a lot of cancers, especially breast cancer. And a lot of women don't realize it's that small of an amount.
Yeah.
So you know, and you think it helps you sleep, but it actually doesn't. And so, you know, I'm just putting that out there. People don't like me for it, but
yeah,
alcohol is not the fix for perimenopause.
So what can help you sleep?
What can help you sleep? So in Australia, melatonin is a prescription. So you can have a chat to your doctor about that. People around the rest of the world can buy melatonin over the counter, which helps, you know, melatonin and cortisol are opposite each other. So if your cortisol is high, it suppresses your melatonin production. Things that enhance melatonin production are, you know, staying off the blue light, darker room, colder room, decreasing stress levels in the evening. There's something called tart cherry juice actually helps the body produce more melatonin. But my favorite things are, I actually love using digestive teas after dinner, like herbal digestive teas with peppermint and licorice and ginger, because if you turn on digestion, you're turning on your calming part of your nervous system and turning off your stress response. That's where I start. Probably magnesium? My biggest thing would be magnesium. Yeah. Okay. How could we not?
Yeah.
By the bucket load. Magnesium biglycinate, a chelate, whichever is working for you, but I will do magnesium. There are great nighttime magnesiums out there that often come with a couple herbs with them.
Okay.
And one of the really big things for hot flushes is magnesium plus taurine. And some of the great powdered magnesiums out there have taurine in them. And you want to be looking for about 3 grams of taurine, along with about 250, 350 magnesium milligrams. And taurine is a precursor to GABA, which is one of your calming neurotransmitters. But it's amazing for decreasing hot flushes, the magnesium taurine combination.
I noticed for me, because Kira, you've got me on that amazing Metagenics Carmex, and I know for me, if I don't take that for a few days in a row, hot flushes come back, can't sleep at night, that kind of stuff. So, and I'm guessing it helps with the anxiety as well, magnesium, because it's so good for the nervous system.
Yeah, unbelievable. And so is the taurine because of the precursor to the GABA.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's my kind of first thing I would ever go for is magnesium plus taurine. If it's a magnesium with a ton of B vitamins and taurine, that's fine. Just take it in the morning. If it's one without B vitamins, you can take it at night. There's also another company in Australia, but it does also exist in America, called Designs for Health. And they have a magnesium Trimag Supreme Night, which has tart cherry, California poppy, and lavender. And I find it makes me sleep like a baby.
Okay.
But all the major big companies, Orthoplex has a Magtor that's amazing with plenty of taurine. Like they all, all the big bioceuticals, they all have them.
Yeah, cool. So what about HRT? And what about Mirena? Like, what are your thoughts about these? Because I know back in the 80s, HRT, in the 90s, my mum went through that and it was not good and it's got a bad name. And now everyone's like, just eat yams, just put on yam cream. What's your feelings about that?
So there's regular HRT, which is pharmaceutical, slightly different to our own hormones. It's not quite the same as the natural hormones we make. Everybody was on it for ages. And then in like 2000, early 2000s, there was this big study which came out with this big scare linking it to, was it breast cancer it was linking it to? I think it was breast cancer and other things. Then everybody went off. So there are times and places where people end up on HRT because they're literally going insane otherwise, or their symptoms are so bad. So it's always something to discuss with the doctor. What we now have, which is like a halfway between natural and the regular HRT, is we now have what are called bioidentical hormones, or but I think that new term the pharmaceutical company is using is body identical hormones, which means they're making HRT, but in a natural form where it's not like when I if I was a pharmaceutical company and I made an HRT, it's synthetic and it's slightly different in its molecular structure to the way we make our hormones, because then I can patent it and make money and do all this stuff. Whereas if you make something that's nature identical, bioidentical, you're making hormones that are identical to what our body makes. So there's hypothetically not the side effects and the dangers. I think it's still new to say it's not a guarantee that there's no danger, but it's definitely a decreased risk from what the studies are looking at. So they're much milder on the body. And so you had to go to an integrative doctor, a doctor who was up on bioidenticals to get that prescribed. And then you had to go to a compounding chemist and get those made. But you can also really change the dosage of like progesterone. You can do progesterone only, or people then do progesterone estrogen, and you can alter the levels to suit what your body needs more so than regular HRT.
And I know the progesterone alone now it doesn't have to be compounded. There's the Prometrium, which is fantastic. And
so a lot more doctors are getting into that because the pharmaceutical companies have gone, oh my gosh, we're missing out on this whole market now. So now in Australia, Prometrium is a bioidentical progesterone. It's set at 100 milligrams. But a lot more doctors are now open to it. Or I know people who've gone in and asked for it and the doctor's like, I don't know what that is, but they've gone and then found out. Because it is a pharmaceutical, they're more, they're more comfortable with it. So that is a big option that I know a lot of people go down. I still think there's a lot to do before you get to the bioidentical. But one of the beauties of bioidentical progesterone is you take it at night. And it actually goes through the liver in its while your body's processing it. And kind of the side effect is it puts you to sleep. Not like a sleeping tablet where you wake up all drugged, but it's amazing the difference in aiding people going to sleep. So, and then hot flushes. So, and dryness and things like that. So that's become probably the most popular thing over the last decade. Before that, there were always yam creams, which are high in progesterone hormones. And there still are great creams that people can buy to put, transdermal, hormones. And then there's the Mirena. So the Mirena is using it's an IUD, but it releases a small amount of progesterone only locally. So much less side effect than maybe someone being on the pill. A lot of women just get left on the pill through menopause, which always kind of confuses me, but I don't really have a big opinion on that. So the beauty of the Mirena is when women are having massive periods, when they're having heavy, heavy periods, one of the benefits of the Mirena is it often eradicates you don't bleed at all for about 6 months while the hormones are really strong within the Mirena, or the period becomes much, much lighter whereas the traditional copper IUD can often make people's periods heavier. So I've seen the Mirena do just wonders for people with that flooding periods.
Yeah, because I've got, friends and clients who just really low iron now because they're bleeding much more and much more regularly, down to a 15, 16-day cycle. So
yeah,
Mirena has really helped.
And the problem is, the more iron deficient you are, the more you bleed. It's this weird anomaly where it's kind of normally with the body, if something's going wrong, it has a mechanism to try to rectify it. But unfortunately, iron is part of a clotting cascade. And so if you're low in iron, it makes your periods even heavier. I'm not really laughing. I'm laughing at the anomaly of it. So we also run into that problem that it's very hard to catch up on those iron levels when you're already deficient, because then you're losing more.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned that, before you get to the Mirena, you get to HRT, there's other things to try. What would you speaking to a naturopath? And
you're speaking to a naturopath. So you speak to a herb, nutritionists know their stuff food wise, but there are herbs that are amazing for hot flushes, for anxiety. There's herbs for sleep. There's herbs to help try to stabilize hormones and hold that progesterone a little bit higher, to regulate, your estrogen to progesterone. There's herbs to help clear the estrogen that we don't want recycling back in our body. So I'm not going to list the herbs because it's really, you need to go see someone. At least go into a health food store and ask if there's a naturopath working in the health food store, which there often is. There's plenty of tablets out there you can try, or go see a practitioner. This is what we're really good at. And we might make you stop drinking a little bit as well, but yeah.
Just for now, just for this period of time.
Yeah. And there's herbs that actually decrease blood flow. Like if you're having really heavy periods, there's herbs that can help with that as well, which a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah. And finally, of course, you and I are both astrologers. So I just love, to hear your insights about astrological transits that can switch this on or make this happen. I link this a lot to the Uranus opposition, and you've said the Chiron return happens around the similar time. What else do you see in terms of astrology?
Well, you really got Uranus opposition. What age is that? Is that 42, 43? Yeah. So often that I agree with you. I know you came out with that on your own when we were conferring, but I agree. It often is the beginning of a trigger of things start to change, right? And it gets, and perimenopause is totally erratic, and it fits that Uranian energy of what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you're great, and then you're not great, and then you think you've got it under control. Oh, I got all my supplements, it's all working, and then something
throws a grenade in there, and
it's like juggling, but you don't realize you actually have 6 balls in the air, but you think it's only 3 in the beginning. So yes, I definitely see your Uranus opposition, or just transits with Uranus in general. I would especially look at, which also depends.
It depends on the chart, I guess, on the ascendant ruler and the sixth house ruler. But I guess, I always see the moon, and the fact that the word hormone anagrams to her moons. I always see that. And Venus too, linked into.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't not look at that. And I would always look at the moon, what's going on with the moon, what's going on with the progressed moon. Where are you in your progressed lunation cycle? I think that can all have triggers, but the one I really see, and again, if you're a traditional astrologer, you're not looking at this that much, but I see Chiron as such a rite of passage, that Chiron return, or even in those 2 years before Chiron return. And Chiron return happens at really different ages for people, but I see a lot of perimenopause to the actual hit of Chiron return to menopause, like actually stopping bleeding, because everyone talks about Chiron as that's how you're wounding as a child, and that healer you got to go over. I see it often in women's charts as wounding around the body and acceptance of the body, and how do I value my body? I think Chiron has a story around that. And Chiron was originally a healer and taught healing. And so I think when we have Chiron transits, it's a lot about teaching ourselves what we need for healing. And I just see that Chiron return, going through menopause or perimenopause, whatever, is you have to totally reconfigure who you are as a woman, right? You are moving into your crone phase, which sounds so scary, but it's actually your amazing power phase. I don't give a fuck.
Knowledge, wisdom. Yes. On my channel. Yes.
It's so powerful, but you have to go through this process of grief, of losing your youth.
And your reproductive years, and almost often a feeling of, well, what's my purpose then? If I'm not here to create children, it's having to own that and own something different, something new. Yeah.
I think there's a bigger story. And if I was a guy, I might know more about the bigger story for men with that change. But what I see in women so much at that, 48 to 52 transition is I have to find my new value as a female. And I really see that as the Chiron return. And Chiron return, often health crisis, often have fatigue at Chiron return, often have an ailment that you got to confront your body and your energy levels. I see a lot of chronic fatigue around Chiron return or post-viral fatigue. So it all sandwiches itself together right around that period. And I just don't think we can ignore what Chiron's trying to teach us at that point. Yeah.
Thinking about it, it makes sense because Chiron in Aries right now in my first house, traditionally anyway, in the whole sign houses, yes, that would make a lot of sense.
Welcome to your body. Yeah. And how and then you move it to the second house and it's truly about how do I value myself? But that first house is the physical body and what's, happening with it. But I think I just so see that Chiron return as that shift into that next phase, which is so amazing, but geez, it's a mess when you're going through.
Yeah.
I can say that because I'm just the other side.
You're giving us hope, Kira.
Not coming back to 3 degrees Aries.
I know, I keep speaking to all my, friends in their 50s and they're like, don't worry, just get through it. You'll be a totally new person on the other side. And even in it, those friends who are in their 40s are just letting go of that need to be sexually attractive, to procreate, that deep human need to procreate. There is a freedom for it. And I think that's why Uranus transits are a big part of this as well. It's kind of freeing women from that need to be this vessel to give birth. It's much so more
true. And it breaks us free. And then you got to kind of reconfigure it through Chiron, right? Like I was just involved in writing an article around major life transits in your health. And I found the whole, Uranus return, and then we have Chiron. If you look at the big transit, you got Uranus return, and then the next big thing is really Chiron. Although when does Neptune square Neptune happen? It's
usually around the same time. It usually is Neptune, and then it depends. Yeah,
I know.
It's usually Neptune about 40, and then Uranus straight afterwards.
2, 4, 3. That's cool.
So we're talking midlife transits here for anyone who's not an astrologer. These are some pretty major.
That's cruel. Those hits right next to each other.
Yeah.
And then you get that little reprieve, and then you hit that Chiron return. And then you're going to walk into the Saturn return, but and I'm not there, but from what I gather from people, not nearly the same situation as that previous one. But that I really see that Chiron return as that finishing of all that stuff that started at 42.
Yeah. And stepping into the maturation of the Saturn cycles. Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. I
so
look
interesting.
If I can find more transits around that. We've also got a Jupiter return at 48.
Yeah.
And 48, you can often have these big things going on with the hormones, and then down, and then it's because it's not just a dive of progesterone and estrogen. That progesterone does take a slow, but if you actually look at photos of the estrogen is going like this, and it reminds me of Jupiter just kind of going, I'm trying to go big, no I'm not, I'm trying to go big, no I'm not. And I really see that 48 is really when you have that estrogen taking you on a roller coaster ride. Often, I mean, it's different for every woman, but commonly, that Jupiter return is it's an interesting thing to throw in there, actually. into health mix.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Kira, for a really information-packed chat. And if you want to find out more information, where can people find you?
Oh, sure. So I am, if you just want my naturopathy side, I am, my social media is Uber Health, just one word, Uber Health, or kirasutherland.com.au. If you want my astrological health side, that is social media, and my website is astrologyofhealth.com.
Fantastic. And definitely worth a follow, just for all the information she's always dropping on there. I can learn a lot. So.
Always good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks a lot, Kira.
Okay.